Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of On the Mark on Westfield Community Programming Channel 15 on 89.5 FM WSKB and Southwick Community Programming. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach, and this first half hour of On the Mark today, we're going to get a chance to chat with Mike Ballway, who is the editor of the Westfield News, which is your daily newspaper for Greater Westfield and some of the area. And what's important here is that Westfield has a daily newspaper. There are so few of them left in Massachusetts, and particularly in Western Mass. We have the Republican, we have the Daily Hampshire Gazette and the Greenfield Recorder and the Berkshire Eagle up in Pittsfield and the Westfield News. It is daily. And in this changing media landscape, daily newspapers have often fallen apart. Weekly newspapers are struggling, and the whole media landscape changes day in and day out. But we're very fortunate here in Westfield to have a resource like the Westfield News, and Mike Ballway is my colleague there, and I'm so glad to have you back here on the Mark. It's good to see you.
Great to see you, Mark.
So you were here last fall, I guess, not too long after you had taken the helm of the editorship at the paper, and you had many challenges before you, not only running a daily paper, but working within the umbrella of Reminder Publications and Mass Live, but also maintaining an equilibrium in a community that needs news and needs to get their news delivered. So here we are 6 months later. How have things changed for you?
Well, I guess I just worked into a rhythm here. You mentioned that I work on the Westfield News. Also edit a weekly newspaper called The Penny Saver, which I'm sure a lot of our listeners are familiar with. Which goes to all the community, all the homes in Westfield and Southwick and many of the hill towns, and also a weekly newspaper called The Reminder, which is a large organization, and I work on the Ag One West Springfield edition. So I do some editing in a lot of our local communities, and that's been just getting to know some of these communities. I mean, some of them I knew already, but getting to know them has been a process over the past half year, and we've had just getting to know people has been the story of the past half year.
What are some of the expectations that you've had or thoughts that you had when you arrived that have changed over 6 months?
Gosh, I don't know that any of that really has changed. I knew coming in that Westfield is a great community for the arts. I knew that it's a proud city with a lot of people who are very proud of where they're from, and I'm very glad to be part of that. I'm glad the newspaper's part of that, and I'm glad to be able to tell those stories. I don't think there's really anything that's taken me too much by surprise.
Yeah. What are the challenges? People ask me, because I work in radio as well as print, what are the challenges that I feel as a reporter working in these times? And as an editor, I mean, I don't know how you feel, but I feel that on a national level, the media has been attacked so much, and so much of it is unfair. Our job is to tell stories. And it's been very difficult with the attacks coming from all sides to do an effective job being a good reporter and editor. But things seem to be getting better. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think that there's a lot of criticism of the media for a variety of reasons, and one of them is the national media. And we could sit here and debate, how many of those criticisms are valid, but I think what a lot of it boils down to is, a lot of the stories that get into the national media don't reflect what's going on in people's immediate lives, and that's because they're writing these big stories out of Congress or out of Washington D.C. Or out of New York City or out of Los Angeles that are about what's going on in those places, and they're not necessarily about Westfield, Mass, or about Kansas or Ohio or any place like that. And people in those places, in places like Westfield, they look at these stories and they say, well, these are not the issues that I confront on a daily basis. And these people that are quoted in this story, I don't know anybody who talks like that. I don't know anybody who thinks like that. The Westfield News is a local newspaper. Our stories are about Westfield and Southwick, and Russell and Montgomery, surrounding towns. And we talk to people who talk like you because we talk to people in your community. And it's one thing that's been difficult in our industry, in my slice of our industry, our slice of our industry, is that we sometimes do get tarred with the same brush as the corporate media or the elite media. And that's not what we do. What we do is tell local stories about local people, about your local government, about the issues that matter to your town.
And I don't know. I find that oftentimes the national headlines or the international headlines, they do impact how we live our daily lives. I mean, we can't walk the streets or think about things without these days thinking about what's happening in Ukraine or Buffalo and all of that. But some of the more important things that we still have to face every day is that pothole that's on the street that's killing our tires as we drive to work, or the fact that gas is more expensive at our local gas stations. And it's hard as a reporter, to balance the two out. I mean, we do need to know what's going on in the world at large because it trickles down and impacts us. But some of the things that are happening right in our own backyard are equally as important, because without those being fixed or dealt with or handled, we can't face the bigger things.
Right, and even with those large stories that impact us all on a nationwide or even worldwide basis, there's a story to be told about a lot of them here locally. So, for example, a great example is the war in Ukraine, right? Everyone knows, from having read it on social media or in large newspapers or hearing about it on the radio or watching it on TV, everyone knows the basics of what happened in the Ukraine and what's going on, with Russia's invasion of that country. And we get updates every day. There have been some days when to look at the news coming out of Ukraine would make us feel really depressed about what's going on in the world. It's a very sad story in most ways. But there's also been, here in Westfield, a lot of good news to tell about how the community has rallied and about what's been going on at Full Gospel Church, for example. The amount of fundraising and supply collections that they've made over the course of the past couple months. Some of the great work they've done to support the people of Ukraine, to support the refugees from Ukraine. And that's something that those are stories that we've been able to tell in the Westfield News and the Penny Saver about efforts to welcome refugees, about, like I said, the fundraising efforts and the supply drives that they had at Full Gospel Church. We just did a story in the Penny Saver that's coming out this week, about the car wash that Full Gospel Church put on. That's something where you're not going to get the story about Westfield's reaction to the war in Ukraine anywhere else but in the Westfield News.
So how many people are involved in getting the Westfield News printed and online every day?
That's a really good question. I actually don't know how many we employ at our presses. We are printed at the same place as the Springfield Republican is. But we've got a good handful of sales representatives. We've got three primary reporters who work on the paper, and another guy who's half-time. It's one staff that puts out the three papers that I work on: the Westfield News, the Penny Saver, and the Ag One West Springfield edition of the Reminder. And then we've got, I don't know, we've got so many people, there's so many circulation carriers that they work for the Springfield operation. So I don't really know exactly how many of them there are. But there are a lot of hands involved.
Yeah, there are. And people don't realize how many people it takes to put together a paper every day, you know.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, there's some of our stories come in from the State House News Service. They still have to be edited. Some submissions come in from local organizations. You know, if they want to announce they're having an upcoming church dinner, or they're holding a fundraiser of some kind. Those items come in. They still have to be edited. They still have to be laid out and fit into the puzzle that is the printed page. And then of course we have our reporters who are three of them are full-time, one of them's half-time, and they're working a full week doing the work that they do. Just tracking down news sources, sitting there and writing their story and editing it and tinkering with it until it gets to be exactly what it needs to be. It's a time-consuming job.
One of the things,
as you well know, as a writer.
Yeah, I do. One of the things that's different now, and really an enhancement, is the fact that the online version of the Westfield News is part of Mass Live. So more people have options to find what's going on in Westfield, and people in Westfield have an option to see their stories projected to a larger venue and arena. Are the stories that appear on the Westfield News in its entirety, does that appear online every day, or are they different?
So they're pretty much the exact same stories. The stories that our reporters do, that our reporters write, they get posted to Mass Live, just like the stories that the writers for the Republican write get posted to Mass Live. Some of the smaller items that are in the paper, we don't put on Mass Live. It's kind of a judgment call, but a lot of times, especially if we're running the same item more than once, we definitely won't put it on Mass Live the second time, because once it's online, it'll be online forever. Some of the smaller items, we still want people to pick up the print edition of the newspaper for that. Sometimes when there's a submitted item or a press or a news brief that we think is we'll have regional interest, we'll put that on Mass Live as well.
So we're going to take a quick break to acknowledge the underwriters that make this program possible. But before we do, if somebody's listening today and has maybe seen a newsstand with the Westfield News and they want a home delivery, how do they get that? And where do they find the Westfield News online?
We're online at masslive.com. That's masslive.com. And our stories are integrated into the Mass Live website. So if you just go to masslive.com/Westfield News, that's where all of our stories are. But if you also they have a separate news feed for Westfield, which I believe is masslive.com/topic/Westfield. And they have one for Southwick as well. And you'll find our stories in there as well. If you want to subscribe, I welcome you to subscribe. It's 413-788-1100 is the number to call, and tell them that you'd like the Westfield News and Republican bundle, because when you subscribe to one, you get them both.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break to acknowledge our underwriters, so we'll be back to talk more with Michael Ballway, who's the editor of the Westfield News and the Westfield Penny Saver and the reminder editions of the Westfield. He's a guy that wears multiple hats and works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. He works 28 hours a day. I'm Mark Auerbach. I work 24 hours a day. Well, I'll be back after these messages.
Underwriting for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Westfield, serving the youth of the Whip City and surrounding communities since 1969. For more information on the Great Futures Club for ages 3 to 5, happening weekdays, and the Club Teen Center for ages 11 and older, weekdays from 6:30 till 8 p.m., go online at bcgwestfield.org or visit the club at 28 West Silver Street. The Boys and Girls Club of Greater Westfield. Great futures start here. Underwriting support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Greater Westfield Chamber of Commerce, the voice of business for the Greater Westfield communities. Informing, educating, and advocating, the Chamber provides opportunities for members to make meaningful connections on local, regional, and state levels. For more information on the Chamber's many events, workshops, and programs, as well as the benefits of membership, visit westfieldbiz.org. The Chamber focuses on the most important economy, yours.
Join us every Thursday morning
from 6 until at least 7:30.
Check out the Bobby G and Company Show
right here on WSKB 89.5
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 at 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to On the Mark, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. If you've missed a part of today's program or you want to watch it again or share it with your friends, it's archived on YouTube under WSKB Community Radio. Our guest for this first half hour is Michael Ballway, who's the editor of the Westfield News, my colleague and partner over there. And the Westfield News is a daily newspaper serving Westfield and its surrounding communities. It's one of only a handful of daily newspapers that still originate in our area, and it's an important resource for the community of Westfield and Southwick and the hill towns and around. They also publish the Penny Saver, which has been a weekly favorite for many over the years. And when I first got involved in Westfield, and I hate to say this because it makes me older than I want to be, but approximately 40 years ago when I worked at the Springfield Symphony and they established a summer music series at Stanley Park, I had my first opportunity to go to the Westfield News, and it was a locally owned paper at the time. And I remember their publisher, Carol, who set us up with a program, and she was so proud of the fact that the Westfield News had been here for generations and generations. So, Mike, I'm not sure how old the Westfield News is, but it's been around a long time.
It certainly is decades. It goes back to the early 20th century. I don't know the exact age of the paper.
Yeah, and it always was a daily paper. It didn't start as something else. I do know that in its history, at a certain point in time, it was sold to All Britain, which was a television company. And it was one of the few newspaper holdings that this television company had. And then it was sold to Patrick Berry, who was a native of Westfield, who published it until he sold it to Reminder. But it has always been, it's never missed an issue. It's always been a daily paper for generations.
Right, and yeah, I mean, we are under the ownership now of a company called Advanced Publications. They're based in New York, but the decisions that are made, the editorial decisions that are made about what goes in the paper, how we cover stories, how much attention we pay to certain stories, so all made locally. It's all my staff and I that make those decisions. I work with an executive editor named Mike Dobbs, who has been running our weekly newspapers for years, and he's a Springfield guy. He's been in local media he started the Holyoke Transcript Telegram, another one of those great daily newspapers that Western Mass used to have, he's a relentlessly local focus. And he wants me to do the same, and I'm glad to do the same because there's certainly enough news in Westfield, Southwick, and the surrounding towns to fill this front page. We do not, we're certainly capable of finding it ourselves.
Yeah, for you as a journalist, you've been at it for a while. How has your role changed now that we have 24/7 news cycles?
The 24/7 cycle hasn't changed my job too much because of the fact that town news, still proceeds at a slightly less frenetic pace than, say, Washington D.C. or New York City. People still when the people want to talk about, should we run the rail trail extension through their neighborhood? Should we should we allow a self-storage unit business to open up on North Road by Armed Road? People still want to take their time making those decisions. The public hearing process in town boards is still such that it takes weeks to make those sorts of decisions, and that's a good thing. And so we, as the way we cover the news hasn't changed that much. The big change is people are talking. People use the Facebook groups and other social media groups to talk about the news maybe a bit differently than they used to. And so our challenge, the challenge has grown in the past 20 years, has been to pivot away from being the newspaper that gives you the bare facts and the headlines saying, hey, you haven't heard this before, but I'm going to tell you something you haven't heard before. And instead be the news source that tells you, okay, so you might have heard the headline, but we're going to give you the backstory. We're going to tell you why this is important. We're going to explain, the confusing words that these town planners and town engineers are using. And we're going to help you make sense of it. And I think that's been the big. That was always a part of journalism. I mean, if you go back, 20, 30, 40 years, you'll see a lot of articles, especially in Sunday newspapers, where they're saying, okay, well, let's take a deep dive on this topic that we've been writing, daily stories about all week. So that's always been part of what we do, but it's become more important to us in the past 20 years, I'd say, because of the fact that the headlines have moved online in many ways.
One of the things that I find that changes for me as a reporter covering the arts is, number one, people don't pick up a hard copy of a newspaper anymore. They tend to read it online. So, as I know, I can submit a story to you, and it can be online within 20 minutes if it's that important a news thing. So you don't have to wait to certain points to see your news. It just shows up. And there's also there may be a less reporters out there covering it, but with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all these individuals posting their own news and of what they think is important, there's a plethora of things out there. And oftentimes I get a press release from an arts organization about an upcoming play or concert or something like that. But the news is already out there on Facebook. They've posted it. They've got something on LinkedIn or Instagram or TikTok or something like that. And by the time I, as a traditional journalist, get their press release, it's old news. So, I have to be looking for my news, not only in my inbox, but also what's being posted all over the place. And I'm sure that that's changed for you as well. Some of these message groups on Facebook about Westfield, where you hear about things that are going on, you hear them before they actually make it to print or to us here on radio.
Yeah, but sometimes what you hear isn't true. And, a lot of times that's because, and that happens to us too sometimes because, the nature of news is that it's something new. And sometimes people don't, even official sources sometimes don't always know exactly what's going on, or they have a mistaken idea, and eventually it comes out, and we as the story develops, we nail it down to what the objective truth is, if such a thing is possible. But but sometimes people just go, you've I'm sure seen this in just conversations. This has always been this way. People hear something, they might misinterpret it. They don't know that a word used in a certain context means a certain thing, and they think that what they have is something interesting to spread around town, and then it turns out not to be entirely true. And the great thing that the newspaper can offer or any professional journalism outfit, whether it's in print or online, is the ability to kind of put the brakes on a rumor, go to an official source, or go to the actual scene of whatever controversy it is. Have a unbiased professional person do his or her best to find what the actual facts of the situation are, and then relay that information in a non-sensational way. Just trying to help people understand the truth of what's going on. And that's a need that we're always going to have.
One last question for you before we go. You're a news person. Where do you get your news when you're not? Where do you get your global news? Somebody asked me the other day, what newspapers do I read online, or what television news or radio news do I watch for my own personal use? What about you? Do you, as a news person, you must be consumed by news by a variety of things. Where do you go for your news?
Yeah, listen, there's a couple podcasts I listen to. There's a couple of magazines I subscribe to. One of my favorite magazines is The Atlantic. I think they do a great job, and there's always something interesting every month in The Atlantic. And they have a website as well that I like to read. I keep an eye on. There's another magazine that I like to read called Reason, which is more of a libertarian magazine. I'm not sure about that. It might be a bit challenging in its politics to some people, but they do a lot of interesting reporting as well. With the job that I have right now, it's a lot of time just to keep track of the local news. I don't read as much national and international news as I used to. I used to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, and I've always found that to be the gold standard in terms of national news. But I would encourage people to read as many newspapers as they can, and I love print, but even online, I mean, the New York Times honestly does great work. The Wall Street Journal does great work. A lot of the.
I miss the days. I mean, I just don't have the time in my life anymore to pick up a cup of coffee in the morning and kick back with a newspaper. I end up sitting with the coffee in front of the computer, cruising the New York Times very quickly in Mass Live, and then running off to work. But, I stop and think about it. 10 years ago, there was a stack of newspapers in the house waiting to be read, and particularly the Sunday Times or the Sunday Globe. And now it's all on my tablet.
Yeah. And I used to read multiple newspapers a day, and I just don't. I mean, obviously I read the Republican every morning, and I obviously read my own paper, the Westfield News. But yeah, I mean, 15, 20 years ago, I probably would have been reading the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, in addition to those, and maybe even more.
Well, Mike, we're out of time. I want to thank you for joining us. We've been chatting with Michael Ballway, who's the editor of the Westfield News. If you live in Westfield, it's a great local resource for news. Pick it up on the newsstands. Go find it online where it's under Mass Live. All you have to do is search out Westfield when you get to Mass Live, and you'll find the stories. So thanks for being here with us this morning, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
We'll be chatting soon. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back with more On the Mark. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. I'm Mark Auerbach. Don't go away.
Support for community radio on WSKB is provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. On the web at bettsplumbing.com or at 14 Coleman Avenue in Westfield.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield.
Join me, Tina Gorman, each week from 6 to 8 a.m. for Wake Up Wednesday, when my guests and I discuss health, wellness, and lifestyle reimagined.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to On the Mark, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. And we're headed over now to Stanley Park in Westville with Bob McKean, who's the director of Stanley Park. And for those of you in Westfield and the surrounding areas, you probably visit Stanley Park on a regular basis. For those of you who pass through or pass by Westfield, Stanley Park is one of the great reasons to come to Westfield. I was first introduced to Stanley Park about 40 years ago when I was working for the Springfield Symphony Orchestra, and they came to do a summer pop series at Stanley Park and continued that for several years, up until maybe 20 years ago. And I discovered Stanley Park in all seasons. It's beautiful in the wintertime when it's quiet. Spring, summer, and fall, it's awash in colors. It's a great recreational area. It has concerts of its own, and all kinds of resources. And Bob, it's got to be a tough job for you, keeping that place open 365 days a year.
Well, the big thing about it is quite frankly, is that I consider myself the bus driver here. We have some wonderful people who have done this for many, many years. We've got employees, I say our oldest, and I don't mean by age, there you go. Don't mean by age, I mean it by time been here. He's been here 47 years. So,
wow.
And a lot of them are in the 30 years, and they know their job. They know they're as dedicated, and I'm glad they're on the bus I drive.
How many years old is Stanley Park now?
Oh, it's 72. It's 72 years old. I'm a year older than the park, so I know how much work I need to get fixed.
And, people don't realize, there's the developed land that's part of Stanley Park, the playing fields and the pavilion and the gardens and all that, but there's also undeveloped land along the river. How many acres is Stanley Park, and how many people does it take to make Stanley Park run 365?
It takes a big family because we're a private nonprofit, and we basically live off of donations and people who help us and grants that we write. The total acreage is about 300 acres. The part that's up here that you say that we can walk around pretty easy and ride around and stuff is about 100 plus a little bit acres up here that's developed. The others are over 5 miles of trails, walking trails down there. And it's a sanctuary. It's the beverage sanctuary that a lot of running is done down there, a lot of walking. And it gives you a good exercise by just doing that. Some people do it every day. There's people here very, very early in the morning and all the time. Now, when we're open officially, usually the first Saturday in October to the last Sunday in November. That's when all the gates are open. But even during the winter, we leave one gate open so people can still get in and just be able to walk around a little bit. But we do the best we can to keep it snowplowed.
I was very surprised because I did some work for Stanley Park maybe 20 years ago. And we did some filming over and photographs over the course of the year, and the colors, the way things change there. You could go to the same spot in spring, and over a period of 3 weeks, the flowers, there were different colors of flowers, and then in the wintertime, you could see the evergreens and all of that. It's just a wash of color of different kinds day in and day out.
Well, what we say here is we've got something for everyone and for all branches. And even I think, I don't know if you got a copy of it, but our greenhouse right now is completely full of beautiful flowers that they're going to start planting next week. And those all came in as little plugs. They were just little tiny plugs. And they were planted in here by the team that has one of the oldest people working with us, Paul. And it's just beautiful. I know I started in February of a year, and I was just amazed by what I saw every day, seeing how that grew. and they had to take care of all the stuff that's it's always out there and taking care of it. They just do a wonderful job, and we've got people who do the mechanics, so we have the tools to do it.
Yeah, but not only do you plant things, but you have perennial gardens as well, the roses that come back year after year. But also, who maintains the trails and the woods seem natural down by the river and everything. Is that actually maintained, or do you just give it the space to grow as it will?
Well, we try to take care of it as best we can. There's times when a tree will fall. We have to get that out of the way. I mean, we take care of it to be as safe as possible. And we always ask people, make sure they bring a radio with them, because we've had a couple of issues that if they didn't have a phone, and it doesn't always work, because obviously it's not a landline down there. That you want to be safe, and you want to make sure people know you went down there. Anyway, we had some problems that if it wasn't for hearing somebody yell, we would have had some real serious problems. So they just got to be careful. That's all.
When people who have never been to Stanley Park make their first visit out there, and got to say it's free to go, and all that, what are some of the highlights that you recommend people take the time to look at while they're at Stanley Park?
Well, like I said, they got a little bit of for everything. There's always sports. We've got our tennis courts and our basketball courts. We're very fortunate to have had those taken care of and still there. John Hansen, we give him the thank you for the assistance there. But you can come in and you can walk every different areas. We've got lakes, ponds, I should say, that are down. We call them the three ponds that are down there, and our ducks are there, our geese are there, and our wildlife, black squirrels are around. So there's different buildings. We can have them come in on tours, and we try to do that as well. Our Carillon Tower, which we're redoing, and hopefully we're going to have the rededication June 4th. And that was built again a long time ago, and it needed there's not that many Carillon Towers in the country, and we're one of them. So that's one. Of course, the Sunday night concerts, people come to that. That's going to start again June 5th, this one, and they're on Sunday nights. And there's just so many different areas that people walk and see different things. That there's always something to see.
In terms of a question that somebody asked me to ask you, the ducks and the geese that show up every time you're at the park, do they actually live there, or do they migrate in and out?
Well, the ones that are always down there, and there's a funny story with it, there's usually a geese and swan. There was two swans well before I got here, and one of them got hit with a rock, and the other one has survived for probably, I've been here 14 going on 15 years. So that the one that's left has been lonely for a while. So, but we have a lot of other geese, white geese, and other geese that are there. And then something happened during about 5 or 6 years ago. We had a geese sitting on about 5 eggs, and all of a sudden they hatched, and they were all Canada geese. Now, we don't know how that happened, but they're there. So that right now we've got about maybe 15, because now they're reprogrammed, and they take care of themselves, and they're pretty local, because sometimes we'll get bet you 5,000 Canada geese that land in our fields, not only here but across the street at Westfield State, and they just migrate from the big river out here, and we don't like to let them stay.
Yeah,
but the rest of them they stay, and they're wonderful. We feed them all, and we have our people feed them as well, and but no bread, just got to be real good food.
Yeah, what do they? If somebody wants to come feed the geese, what do you recommend they feed them?
Well, there is some grain that they do feed, and it's we buy packages of it. We have some little 25-cent things you can get a couple of handfuls for, or anything else. And then if we tell people if they want to go, and we'll tell them exactly what they can, and they can get their own if they would like, because we only offer the 25 cents just so that in case somebody didn't have anything and they want to just do a thing. And it works out very, very well. It's cost effective and it breaks even. So at least the people can have a chance to do that. And the youngsters and the children love it.
We're going to take a quick break to acknowledge our underwriters. But before we do, if people want to learn more about Stanley Park, how can they find you online?
Well, it's stanleypark.org is one. They can always come by or just send us an email. Mine is director@stanleypark.org. But if you can send us an email, we'll send you out information. We're glad to do it, or give us a call. And we would be very glad to help you out and tell you about all the things that the buildings that can be rented. They can have weddings here. They can have all kinds of things. But I'll tell you some more of that if you want to go to break.
Yeah, we're going to go to a break. We'll come back. We're going to talk more with Bob McKean from Stanley Park of Westfield. Peter Coles is our chief engineer today. If you've missed a part of today's programming, or you want to watch it again or share it with friends, it's archived on YouTube at WSKB Community Radio's YouTube page. I'm Mark Auerbach. We'll return after these announcements.
Underwriting is brought to you by Boise Cascade Distribution, providing products and services needed for building material dealers, home improvement centers, and industrial customers. They offer everything from engineered wood and plywood to Drex decking and railing, James Hardie siding, and Advantech subfloor. Located at 33 Fowler Street Extension in Westfield and on the web at bc.com, they are committed to providing quality products, great service, convenience, and value.
Underwriting for Community Radio on WSKB is brought to you in part by Rockies. Over 30 convenient locations throughout Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Connecticut, and Florida. One of the nation's largest ACE dealers. Expertise and great product selection in paint, hardware, lawn and garden. That's Rockies. Rock solid service since 1926. On the web at rockies.com.
Listen to me, Michael Buster McMahon, Mondays 8 to 10 a.m. to learn the stories behind your favorite songs. Or don't. I'm not the boss of you.
Community Radio.
89.5 WSKB. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM, WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to On the Mark, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. We're spending this half hour with Bob McKean from Stanley Park of Westfield. If you've never been to Stanley Park, it is a jewel in Western Massachusetts. It's free to go. It's on Western Avenue in Westfield, very easy to access from downtown Westfield or the Mass Pike. And it is acres upon acres of playing fields, trails, gardens, and there are concerts and other activities there all year round. So it's really a great resource. Bob, how did Stanley Park come to be? Who donated it? Whose idea was it initially to have a park like this?
Well, it's a wonderful story. Frank Stanley Beveridge, going way back, he was from an orphan from Canada, and he worked at the time for Fuller Brush, and that was when they had the salesmen go door to door and everything else like that. Well, he decided that he was going to start his own business and have it so that they could have parties at home selling similar stuff, similar items for household stuff. And so he decided to come down. I love this particular story is that decided to come down and start going down, say the East Coast, even though it's not really, but he was on the western part of Mass. And if everybody remembers, you used to have just one bridge going over the bridge that goes up to the Pike from the city. And then now you have two on both sides, and it's beautiful. I remember the one bridge, so I remember exactly what it was. But he drove over that bridge, and as the story goes, when he was coming through the town of Westfield, or coming into it, he drove over that bridge, and he saw something, and he pulled over on the right side of the road when he came across the bridge, pulled over, and he's quoted as saying, "I'm building my business here in Westfield." Now, if everybody would like to guess what he saw, they probably would. Who knows, right? But I'll tell you the answer. The answer, what he saw was flowers on the side of the bridge. And the pots or whatever they used way back then, he saw that, and that really struck him. And that's what really started him using or thinking. And then ultimately built Stanley Home Products here in Westfield. And that's how the park kind of got started too, because part of he would have they bring all the salespeople from all over the world, and the only country that they did not sell in or anything was Australia. So he had people from all over the world that would come here in Westfield and have their meetings and so on. And that's why one of the places we have is called the Acre Lawn. And that was where they used to have all of their get-togethers there, and some of that when they first started. And it was just so exciting. And our understanding is that the foundation for Mr. Beveridge still helps pay for some of the flowers on the bridges to this day. And it's just, you never know. You know what they did back then, and look what's happened. Stanley Home Products was here, and now we got Stanley Park.
I know that Stanley Home Products is no more, and Mr. Beveridge passed away years ago, but the family, the extended family, has been involved on the board and fundraising for the park and all of that. Yeah. Are some of his descendants still actively participants in Stanley Park?
Oh, yes, there are. And there's, because it's a private nonprofit, only so many members of the family can be on the board. So that way it's fair everywhere. That's just what it goes with private nonprofit. And the Stanley Home, or Mr. Stanley's foundation, assists us. So they do also, they have their own foundation, and they save some money, and they do assist us every year. And the grandson of Mr. Beveridge is still with us. He lives down in Florida now, and some of his great-grandchildren that are around are still some of them are on the board and everything else. So there's an access of at least a few or four of them or so that are on the board, and then it's open to the public or whoever gets elected to the board. And but it's done very, very well. And we try to keep Mr. Beveridge. Sometimes I remember this, and say, what would Mr. Beveridge do when you're trying to make a big decision? Now, again, times were a lot different than they are today, because obviously there's some things we can't do anymore. But you do that as well.
Was the family the ones that envisioned, for example, the pavilion or the Japanese garden or the Carillon, or did that? Where did those ideas come from in the past?
Well, the old pavilion and everything was set up way back when they had their, we call them their pilgrimages, when they came here and did their meetings and everything else out there. So it wasn't just out in the field. They had a place where they had that. And then what happened after the years is we had to raise some money in order to be able to survive here, because Stanley Home Products is no longer. It's just a wonder to see some of the historic stuff that they had back then, because Mr. Beveridge and his family kept a lot of stuff that was still around. And it's just amazing what it was. And quite frankly, it's just we try to do everything that we possibly can. We do have some rules, though, and all we do is ask people, don't come in and pick the flowers. Yeah. I mean, we get a lot of that, and it's too bad. They do, and we appreciate it, because we want them there for everybody. We'll pick them up in the fall and take care of them, make sure they're back out if we have to, and so on. But let's keep them there for everybody so that they can all enjoy.
Oh, that makes sense. The flowers that are planted every year, I know you have the greenhouses. Is it, let's say, the children of this year's marigolds or next year's marigolds, or do you get your seeds and everything from other sources?
Well, we get some of the stuff there, what we call their plugs. So they've started to be growing, but they all come in little plugs. Basically, if you talk about the size of a cigarette, I don't say smoke because I don't, but about that size is a plug, and that's what they start with, and they plant each one. Our team plants each one, the team that's in there, and they work to get them all planted, get them out there in the greenhouse, let them grow. And like I said, he told me just yesterday that they're going to start planting them back out there now that the weather's turned a little bit warm. It's usually a little bit earlier than this, a week or so, but we've had a lot of cold weather.
And you also have perennial gardens. And I remember at one point doing a photo shoot out there. There was an herb garden. I don't know if that still exists, but the smell of rosemary in November is overpowering in some of the places there.
One of the other things when you talk about the herb garden, because that's over why the enchanted oak is one that they used to always go with the pilgrims through and everything else. It's a huge oak tree. It had to be fixed up a little bit, but it's there, and that's where all the pilgrims went. And if anybody wants to find it, we can show them where it is. But it's behind the new pavilion now, and the reason the new pavilion had to be built is the other one basically was falling apart, and it wasn't going to be safe. So it was shortly after I got here, so it was a fairly big event to have to do, but we got it done. And that's why some of the other things that we're doing is through the generosity of this wonderful area and town and city and people who visit us, because we couldn't do it without them, and we appreciate it. But we're going to try to keep doing it too.
Yeah, and are there guided tours, or can people just wander about however they want?
Well, the answer is yes, both. We do have guided tours. What they should try to do is get our pamphlet. If they want to just go to stanleypark.org and or send us an email or call us or anything, we'll make sure we'll send them some of the information. We got a brochure that'll tell everybody what's going on. We also have a pamphlet that goes out usually once a year, and it's called Lasting Footprints. And it's a good story about what has happened in the park in the past year and what we're going to have going for the year. But anybody can come by, drive in, drive back to the offices back here. Just follow the rules, please, because we have some wonderful children that just run out on you. You got to be really careful of everybody and enjoy that. We've got a handicap playground down there that was also started, and we invite people, please come and enjoy this. This is something we want to do. If you see something that's not right, let us know. We'll take care of it too. But we're here to have the people enjoy themselves and kind of pay it forward for Mr. Beveridge and all the people that work for Stanley Home Products. Boy, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have this, and we can't thank them enough. So the only way to do that is pay it forward.
Bob, thanks for being with us today. We've been chatting with Bob McKean from Stanley Park in Westfield on Western Avenue, in between downtown Westfield and Westfield State University. It's open to the public free of charge all year long. For information, stanleypark.org. And this wraps up another edition of On the Mark. Peter Coles has been our chief engineer today. If you've missed a part of today's program, want to watch it again, share it with friends, you'll find it archived on WSKB Community Radio's YouTube page. We'll be back next week with another edition of On the Mark. Thanks for being with us. See you next week.